we'll pick up where we left off. And where we left off is we had this small little file exported as IFC. But what we noticed here is that basic project metadata is not set up correctly. And for most part, this is not actually a problem because a lot of people don't even look at this data. You know, when they federate it or they put their BIM model on a USB and then leave it in the bottom drawer, who really cares what the project's name? It says so in the title block. It says so in the file name. But you know, if you're developing a large real estate portfolio, it kind of starts to matter what your project names are, what your site names, what your building name is. So in the same way that in Revit, there is a button over here somewhere where you can set up your project information. And it's generally a good idea to be filling that stuff out. Same thing in IFC. So we show you how to fix all of that stuff out. So I guess we'll start with the project. And the project has a number of attributes. It has a name, a long name, and phase. And the first thing we're going to fill out is the project name. And the project name is usually a short code given to the project. So for example, if your naming scheme of your project has something like, let's say your project is named a file like A architectural, and then the project is ABC. And then, I don't know, you have facade or some sort of other naming scheme, but there's a portion of this which is a short code which resembles your project. You know, that's how you're naming things when you exchange data, and that's what should be in your project name. Whereas the long name is what contains the full name. So it might be something like ABC Road Commercial Town, or whatever it happens to be. So this is a common thread that you'll see in our industry. We often give two names to things. We give a short name, which is used in file names, in document titles, in the title block, or in emails, or in codes used to log our messages. Whereas there's also a longer name, which is spelled out in contracts, for example. So let's go and name that. So to enter in this name, we'll go into project information, and it's built in, and you're not going to enter in this one, you're actually going to enter in this one, the project number. So this is where you put ABC. It's slightly confusing that way, but that's just the way it is, because it does intuitively match the number semantically a little bit better. It's just unfortunate, there's a bit of a naming inconsistency with an IFC and Revit. And here you would put ABC Commercial Development. Let's say you're doing a new office tower or who knows what. What am I doing this? I'm doing this in the wrong model. Let's do that one more time. So average project information, sorry about that. So ABC Commercial. And we'll make this ABC. Great. And export one more time, and we'll get a better export. Okay, so now you can see our project has the short name of ABC, which is great, and it has the long name of ABC Commercial Dev. Now, these are not the only attributes available on a project. There's also the phase, which, as you've guessed by now, is filled out by this status field. So we can say this is on the construction phase of the project, so that's a pretty simple one. But that's not all. If we click edit here, you'll see that there's also a description and an object type attribute. So the description would be like, I don't know, new office renovation, blah, blah, blah. Just a few words to describe what's going on. Imagine if somebody sent you a BIM model with no context, you'd be like, okay, what's in here? This would tell you what it is. You know, if you're renovating a new build, an old build, whatever. How many, what's the scale of the project, that type of information. Now, there is not actually, and let me just double check here, there's actually no built-in place to put this description attribute. You'll need to add a new project information parameter to do that. So to do that, you'll want to go back to the Autodesk Revit IFC GitHub webpage and go to the install folder. And in the program files to install, you'll find two shared parameters files provided by Autodesk. One of these are for type-based parameters, the other one's for instance-based parameters. And because this parameter is on the project, which is an instance, we're going to be using this one. And we are going to be, in this shared parameters file, you'll find a shared parameter called IFC description. And that's the shared parameter that we're going to need to add in order to add a description to our project. So you'll click on the raw button here, which will bring you to a raw text file. Right click, save as, let's dump it on the desktop. I already have one, that's okay, I'll overwrite it. And oops, back into Revit here. We go to shared parameters. It's quite a few clicks, don't worry about it. It's a sort of a one-off thing. You click the one that I just loaded, press OK. Now project parameters, press add, shared parameters, press select. It seems like a lot of steps, but Revit users are pretty comfortable with this. And you'll see that out of the huge list of possible parameters, in there somewhere is IFC description, which you can add. It's an instance parameter. You can make it part of a project information, and you want to group it under IFC parameters. Once that's done, okay. Now back in here, you'll see IFC parameters, description, and now you can fill out whatever the description is. I don't know, renovation of lobby and new atrium. Who knows? Okay, so now we've got that description field showing up. So let's go back into Blender, double check. And here's our project. And there it is. You can see the description has now been filled out.
Wow.
At the same time,
nice.
Of course, the face. Yeah, it takes a few steps and it's a little bit hidden, but once you know where it is, it's actually not that hard. And the adding of the parameters to the project's a sort of a one-off thing. You know, once you've got a good collection going, it's actually not a lot of work. Now we're left with the object type attribute. And the object type attribute is typically used to specify a further categorization of the object. So Revit users will understand that they have Revit categories and Revit subcategories. This is kind of like a two-level hierarchy. And Revit categories like walls and doors are fixed and part of Revit, and Revit subcategories are this kind of there's some built in, but you can also create your own subcategory. And in IFC, they also have this two-level hierarchy system. You have IFC classes like IFC walls, IFC doors, and you have the other layer of the hierarchy, which is things like called a predefined type. So you can say that this wall is a partition wall, this wall is a solid wall, or a shear wall, or such and such. So there are certain, just like Revit has some built-in subcategories, IFC has some built-in predefined types. However, you can also create your own custom second level categorization name, and that's what this attribute is meant for. So one possible way of filling this out, and there's not yet an agreed convention on this, but one possible way is to say that this is a commercial project, or this is a residential project, or this is a defense project, a health project, or so on, a retail project. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And again, you won't find it in here. You have to add your own shared parameter. So go back into project parameters, add, click, shared.
Is there any place where we can find more written about this?
Which aspect of it?
About how we could use that object type. What should we put in there? Like, I guess it would be something on the Building Smart websites or something like that, or the forums.
Correct. So here's the Building Smart documentation. So let's say you, oops, if I can spell wall correctly, I clearly cannot. For IFC wall would be a equivalent to a Revit category. And then the second level of an IFC wall would be called its predefined type. And so a wall, you are allowed to choose from one of these, and it gives you a name and a description of what it is. However, if you're saying, no, my wall is none of these things, it's a special magical wall that doesn't fit into any of these ISO standardized predefined types, you are allowed to say it's user defined, and then you're meant to fill it out in a separate attribute called the object type. And all this is described over here. So for example, so that's the, here, That's the sentence which says it. It holds the user-defined type if the predefined type is set to user-defined, or when the concrete entity essentially does not have a predefined type attribute. So we're falling into the second category here. A project does not have a predefined type, so you can put whatever you want to further categorize your project. And a pretty useful global categorization are things like health, retail, defense, residential, civil, civic, or those types of categorizations. So this would be a commercial project. It's an office tower. Where are we? So we can put commercial. And you'll notice I'm typing this in all capitals. You don't need to, but it's a good convention to show that the intention is that it is a predetermined list of selectable items. It's not just free for all text. There's a bit of logic and structure to it. And you'll see that all of these, what we call enumerations, are also fully capitalized. So that's why I'm following that convention. So we'll do that, click a couple times, again, load it up, and if we're lucky, everything's done, and there it is. So we filled out every single attribute for our project. Nice and easy. It's set up once and you can set it and forget, and it's just nice and clean.
The first time I see this in my life completely correctly. So.
But you saw it wasn't hard, right? Autodesk gives you the tools, they give you the shared parameters. It's really not that hard, and every project has this like a setup file that they tend to distribute. So why not do it once, get it correct, and everybody has it right. They don't even need to know about it because they're starting from the setup file sometimes. So there we go. So as you probably guessed, it's actually a very similar thing for the site and the building. Except, Revit has a project information button, but Revit doesn't understand what a site is. It's not possible to have multiple sites in Revit. In Revit, there is one site and one site only. In IFC, of course, like the real world, there's no restriction on the number of sites in a project. You can have multiple sites. You can have multiple buildings. In Revit, however, one site, one building, it's fixed. There's no button for it. But of course, there's a way to do it. Again, using those shared parameter files. So again, we go into our project parameters, add shared parameter, select over there. Just wait for a little bit. Okay, so we'll look for a parameter called site name. And over here, again, put it in our project information because that's the way you do things in Revit. It doesn't have a proper place to put site. It doesn't understand what a site is. And there we go, IFC parameters. And you've also guessed there's also a site description, a site land title, a site long name, a a site object type. So, we don't have to go through all of these. We'll just add a description just to show you the process, but it's, people can extrapolate from here. So I'll add those two. Again, go to project parameters, and you might say this could be site A. If you have a large project and you have site A, site B, site C, for example. If you're doing a campus, for example, you might have that scenario going on. Most projects don't, so they wouldn't be doing this. So in that case, you just have whatever you put it in, whatever, typically the address, the way you refer to it in a contract. So you might have ABC Road, and simple as that. But if you had many sites with short codes and long names, then you would have a site name for the short code, and you would have a site long name for the long title. But in this example, let's keep it simple. In fact, I won't even put the description.
Sorry, you said for the land title, I just saw there a parameter which was called like that, land title.
Absolutely. So there is actually a parameter to store I guess this would be the government code of that little parcel of land. So that would be over here, which has recently been moved to a property set instead. And this is a strategy done by Building Smart to increase, I guess, the flexibility and adaptability of these types of attributes. Because as you say, most people don't even see attributes. They just say, BIM is geometry with properties. They don't even realize that there's a distinction between attributes and properties. Anywho, so yes, you would put it in there. So the land title number in Australia, you can see the detailed description for it. It might be in Australia DP 0125 something something something. And again, the same approach is to go into, sorry, not this button, the project parameters, add the appropriate one. There it is, site land title number. And again, put it into IFC parameters, put it into project information.
But this will not work anymore on 4.3, right? Is deprecated in 4.3.
It's deprecated, so it still will work. It's not recommended. It's better recommended to put it in a property set, which we will cover property sets in detail in a future video. We got to say that every session.
Yeah.
Just wait for the next video. We will do more.
Yeah, but there is no lie in that. That's true.
So there we go. That's true, there is no lie. So here's the land title number, and there's our name, nice and clean. Our building has no name. Not so good. For a small project, you might not have a building name. For large projects, when you have multiple buildings, you'll almost certainly have a building name, North Wing, Building 1, 2, 3, Building A, B, C, and so on. And again, exactly the same strategy. You guessed it. Project parameters, add shared parameter. And there we have, building, where's building name? Ah, sorry, I was wrong for the building name. I'll take that back. The building name is built into Revit. The building name is stored in here. So if we call this building A, for example, and then now if you want to add a long name for it, then you would use this approach. There it is, building long name, project information. I think people are seeing the trend here. Not imaginative here at all, but there we go.
Can I ask you for a favor here in Blender BIM? In Blender, can you go to the interface settings and increase the font size for everything, for the entire interface? It's a bit, not only that, if you go to edit and the properties or preferences and the font interface, no, 2 is too much. 1.3.
Okay.
You need to scale down the stuff on the right hand side there. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Good idea. That's a great thing. I'll do that from now on. Okay, so in that case, for those who missed it, here it is, how we cleaned up the project. You can see the project is a commercial project. We have the site over there with its name, and we have building A. So these are just simple attributes which you can set. Okay then, and for most projects, that's actually good enough for simple attributes. Of course, there's more things. For example, the site does have latitude and longitude. The building does have potential other things you could put over here, but we'll cover that in a future video, right? When we talk about things like georeferencing and how to do coordinates properly and how latitude and longitude plays into this.
That's a tricky one.
It is. It deserves its own video. But I guess one more thing to mention is that we've just cleaned up the attributes for a single site, single building. It's not possible to have multiple sites or multiple buildings in Revit, so it's just, I guess, a too bad type of thing. There is something to watch out for. When you hit export, and you go into this IFC export options, there is a mapping of IFC class names to IFC type. So I'm going to just save this to my desktop. And what I'd like to show here is that sometimes there is IFC site put down as one of the classes to export as. So it might seem as though you can create multiple IFC sites. That's not true. It doesn't come out correctly. It will come out as an IFC type, but as an invalid, as an IFC site, but it'll come out as an invalid IFC site. So just to kind of talk about that misconception. There is one strategy to use to export an IFC site, and that's again something we'll talk about later in georeferencing if you have a terrain. But in general, or maybe we should cover it here. I don't know.
But you say that we cannot have two buildings. What do you do if you have on your project more buildings? You just need to have separate models for each of them?
If you want to do it correctly, yes.
Okay, then
Revit doesn't understand two buildings.
What is the workaround then? You export it like this from Revit and then you adjust that in Blender BIM?
Well, you just have multiple IFC models, each corresponding to a different building, correct? And that's pretty much it. Later on, you could federate it using different strategies, but essentially you would have different models describing different buildings.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky, you know, because sometimes you have maybe the same parking, the underground floor. That is common for both of them, right?
Yep, that's okay. And if that's the way it is, then you might have three models, right? Two separate buildings, one shared.
Okay. Okay. So you think a separate model only for the shared part of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why I talk about this kind of export mapping table is because right now we don't have a topography in our model. And if I go into Blender, you'll notice that that site we had no geometry, right? It was invisible. But for example, if we go to massing and site and we go and click some points randomly, we now have a topography in our model. And if I press export, and load that up, you'll see that this one is now our site. So the site used to be invisible, but this one topography is now our site object, and it has a name and so on that we defined previously. But the reason why this is important is because now it's an actual physical object, right? Previously, the site was invisible, and because it was invisible, we had to go into project information and type it out here. But now that we actually have a physical surface representing our site, this can override the project information. So if I go into project parameters, and now if I go into shared parameters and I want to give it a name, let's call it IFC name, and we can make it check all, because there's no reason why you wouldn't call names to other things later. This is an instance parameter. And now we can fill that in as an override name. Press OK. And now we export that. And back in Blender, load it up. Now you'll see that the site has got the override name. So it has ignored the settings that we previously had from the project information. So this is a gotcha, because some, like the architects will typically have a topography, whereas the services will typically not have a topography. So depending on what you're doing, you may want to put the information in a different spot, or you just be aware of this, because it can catch some people unawares. And that's pretty much it. We've covered basic attributes on project metadata.